Chew and ice. Oh, I still haven't fixed that. All right. Good morning. Welcome to the Saturday 6. It is, we've made it to week 2. And here, the real question, and I don't think this is just one team. Who bounces back? There were some teams that definitely played up to expectations last week or beat expectations. Alabama comes to mind. I thought Texas played pretty well against a very solid, Louisiana team. Albeit, of course, Texas has a huge talent advantage in that game. But lots of teams didn't quite live up to expectations. Oklahoma let Tulane crawl back into the game. Michigan actually lived up to expectations for the most part versus Western Michigan. I was going to say Wisconsin and Penn State both were pretty offensively Neolithic, though we did expect Wisconsin to have a very good defense for sure. It did not look as if Wisconsin had fixed their offensive problems, which plagued them last season. And it did not look like Mike Yurcich was the solution to the Penn State offense, at least this way, early on. Oregon, I think people are underestimating how good Fresno State's offense is going to be. That said, I don't think they're like a top 10 offense for sure. But Oregon struggled to contain Fresno State throwing the ball. Ohio State looked good for the most part, but certainly not like the juggernaut that we have seen with Justin Fields running that offense, and the defense gave us many of the same questions we had last year. So we are going to cover some of these teams here. And some of them had even worse days than that. I think we tend to overreact a little bit. I think a lot of people have had some week 1 overreactions. We're going to find out which ones of those, some of those are real, and some of those are some of those overreactions are going to hold up. Some of those overreactions are not, because some teams are going to bounce back and play better. And I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation. I don't know that it's still hard for me to throw out there that there's some sort of 2020 hangover. I think that's true for like a New Mexico State or a UConn who didn't play really. But I do think that, we should have a reasonable expectation that teams can get back to, particularly if they have some coaching staff continuity, same offensive coordinator kind of thing. They'll start to figure things out a little bit, and some won't. If I knew who, I'd be rich. But there are some teams that I think Stanford will figure it out offensively. I think Tavita Pritchard's done a good job. I think, switching to McKee is the right call. I don't think defensively Stanford's going to figure it out until they get a new defensive coordinator, but that's just an example. I mean, there are some teams though that I'm a little less convinced, like Washington's offense. I think they'll be better than we've seen, but I don't know that I would say I wouldn't put figure it out in the sense of becoming a top 25 offense out there. Anywho, let's dive in. I'm excited to talk about that, and I'm going to be at one of these games today. Not like it's a big surprise which one. Ta-da, it's this one. So, Oregon comes into Columbus. They, like we talked about, they kind of struggled a little bit last week with Fresno State. Fresno State was able to throw the ball really well. This is, in some ways, Oregon's going to get some players back off suspension in the secondary. That's going to help considerably. But the problem Oregon had last year was less in defending the pass and much more in their run fit. This is last year's data. So for some teams where it makes sense, because they've changed so much from what we've seen last year, I'm using 2021 data, even though it's still a little volatile. For this game, this is last year's data because I think it mostly shows what we saw problem-wise. So Ohio State had an excellent offense last year. I don't think that they're quite this good this year. But again, what Ohio State really excels at, if you look down there, they're really excellent at running the football. Ryan Day has, and maybe we also say Chip Kelly now, has about the best offensive run scheme in college football for my money. Their offense graded out at number 2 last season. They were very efficient, but also really explosive. The one watch out is last season they had a few too many negative drives. That's 3 and outs, turnovers. Their effective pass numbers at 20. I mean, I think that, I still think that Ohio State's going to be able to run the ball pretty effectively in this game. Oregon struggled with their run fit last year. I do think that Oregon's got some phenomenally talented players. I like Tim DeRuyter, who's their defensive coordinator. I think he's an improvement over Andy Avalos in all likelihood. But Ohio State, Ryan Day's your play caller here on this side of the ball. But I think that Oregon is Ohio State's going to get some rushing yards. The question for the Ducks is minimizing the big plays in the passing game. And this is where we saw Stroud struggle, right? Like Oregon last year, you could drive against this defense a little bit. You can see with that drive efficiency number, their explosive drives number was pretty good. This is something that I was trying to containing the explosive drives in the passing game, because Day's passing game, and the reason why Stroud may have had some struggles, is they run deep option routes, and so the quarterback and the receivers absolutely have to be on the same page on what they're seeing. It does require a little more processing from the QB, right? It's not just looking with the expectation that they're in, and I don't want to sound like like Ohio State's running the most complex passing game in the history of the world. Like almost everyone includes some option routes. But Ohio State's really built on a lot of option routes. In theory, with option routes, like you're never wrong, right? Like you always adjust to the coverage into the right play. I think Stroud's going to, make some leaps in this week. He still hit some really big plays for them. They have an incredible wide receiver core. I mean, I think Ohio State's going to be able to put up some points in this game. The real question is Oregon going to be able to keep up? And that's where, when we flip it over here, the question becomes kind of interesting, right? Oregon's offense was, 20 last season, far better throwing the ball than they were running the ball, which is interesting. They did replace all 5 offensive line starters last year. So they do bring back some experience on their offensive line. Cristobal's recruited pretty well there. Your offensive coordinator here is Joe Moorhead, who's an interesting guy, and you'll see some fun play design from them. But they were good at drive efficiency, number 13 last season. Pretty good at explosive drives. Definitely some room for improvement. They struggled at negative drives. Too many 3 and outs. Too many turnovers. Something to keep an eye on. Anthony Brown's your QB here. He doesn't have great downfield accuracy, but he does have good decision making, and he can move. And that might open some things up for this Oregon offense. So last season, Shuck, who was a more physically gifted quarterback, I think, as far as not necessarily he's not a better athlete than Brown, but he is, a better downfield passer, but he also made poor decisions and missed open receivers. And I don't mean missed like he didn't get the ball there accurately. I mean, he didn't see them and didn't get them the ball when that was the play call. The hope is, I think that, Brown is able to make those correct decisions, even if he's a little less accurate downfield. The worry if you're Ohio State is the defense, and they looked bad again pretty vulnerable again last week against Minnesota. 28 last season. They really struggled in giving up big plays. They didn't look great in coverage last week again. Oregon's going to be able to run the ball as well as Minnesota. Oregon definitely has a better offensive line than Minnesota. Ohio State doesn't look like they have solved all of their rushing the passer, getting pressure on the quarterback problems. We've got this considerably less than at the moment than Vegas does. So we've got an Ohio State with a 74% win probability and a 7.62, as the favorite point spread. This is just, I think this game is really going to turn on how much, how much either quarterback is able to make plays downfield in the passing game, right? They're likely going to have guys open, keying off the run game. And then, Oregon better not finish in negative territory on turnovers if they want to hang with the Bucks. And I'll be there. Bryant and I will be there at the Horseshoe for this. All right. The Cy-Hawk Trophy, or El Assico. Anyway, we've got Iowa. We've got Iowa at Iowa State. I think this game is people are having a little bit of an overreaction to. for what we saw. Indiana has struggled offensively. Iowa handled them pretty easy last week, but this isn't the Indiana team that, say, when Fresno State's new head coach and play caller Kalen DeBoer ran the offense. Nick Sheridan has really struggled as a play caller. The Indiana offense has ended up in a little bit of a ditch. I'm not sure he makes it out of this season if they don't turn it around. But Iowa State, they really struggled last week. But I think with Iowa State, you have so much coming back. You have continuity on the coaching staff. You have Matt Campbell and Kurt Ferentz as your head coach of the Hawkeyes. But Tom Manning is your offensive play caller for Iowa State. I'm not sure Iowa State sort of merits where they finished last season at number 7 overall in Beta Rank. That might be a little high. Again, 2020 had some pretty weird data overall, but they were a very efficient offense last season with Purdy and Hall. 13 in explosive drives as well. They were able to put up some big plays. I mean, you look across these offensive numbers. Iowa State wasn't in the range of like one of those, what I jokingly or seriously call the era of big offense. They weren't in any danger of being included in that list. I mean, even being at number 7, there's significant distance between like the top 2 or 3 offenses, sometimes even 4 offenses in college football, and then 7, 8. That said, it's still a pretty good offense in Ames and last season. I think that this is good. I don't necessarily know that you're going to come away from this game, massively impressed with this offense because, I think Phil Parker is one of the most underrated play callers in all of college football. Iowa comes in last season. They were at number 9, yet another top 10 defense for Phil Parker. They struggled a little bit at drive efficiency. You could put together some longer drives on them last season, but they contained explosive drives. They were able to contain the yards per play, controlling for opponent, all the metrics you see here, controlling for opponent and field position. Negative drives, they forced a lot of turnovers, a lot of 3 and outs, and they were pretty good against the run and the pass. This is going to be a really good matchup here. I am excited to see this. I don't think Iowa State is as good of an off. I mean, there are some offenses out there that, in the era of big offense that can definitely put some points up on a top 10 defense. I don't know that Iowa State is in that range. So they're gonna have to work to score some points against this Phil Parker defense. And I don't think people are going to come. I think people are probably going to come away thinking Iowa State's offense is still struggling, even though in this case it may just be that the opponent was a really significant step up. Even though they may have, they're going to improve off what we saw last week. But the defense was really good for Iowa State last season. John Heacock's your defensive play caller. They graded out at number 2 overall in Beta Rank. Again, you can talk yourself into that being a little high. I still think you're likely talking about a top 10 unit though for them. Number 2 in drive efficiency, number 9 in explosive drives. They did give up, they didn't force quite enough 3 and outs and turnovers, but excellent against the run. That does not bode well for Iowa at all. Because they, last week they ran the ball really well, but they have sort of a Neolithic passing game. Yeah. I mean, you could even say if you don't want to go that far back, you could say antediluvian. Anyway, 34 an effective pass. That's something they could certainly clean up this season as well. But Iowa has, they have the nepotism. They have Brian Ferentz as your play caller. I've harped on this a bit. I don't think anybody in college football would hire him as their OC for a Power 5 team if Kirk Ferentz weren't his dad. So they're at number 48. I don't expect significant improvement. They've hovered around the 40s his entire tenure. They may have one high 30s, I think, but it ain't pretty. And those numbers just aren't. I mean, when you combine that with the fact that you have Phil Parker calling defense, I think it's kind of a bit of a waste of all the incredible defenses they've been running out to keep running Ferentz Jr. out as OC. But they didn't excel at anything in particular. Iowa's going to need the defense to be excellent, the special teams to put them in good field position, and then to maybe get lucky on a big play or two, because I think this game should be really close. I think Iowa State is still the better team. And I think people are overreacting to Indiana having a real bad turnover day. two interceptions returned for touchdowns. I mean, Maybe you get that again, but it's not terribly likely. We've got Iowa State 73% and 7.45 here in this game. This should be a hoot. The Holy War. So this is, I believe I put in, these are 2021 numbers. So where it makes sense to kind of show where teams are at. And for BYU, we've put in 2021 numbers because they are just they're just a very different team personnel wise than we saw last year. So Utah comes in right now. You got Kyle Whittingham as your head coach. Kalani Sitake is your head coach at BYU. The Utah offense is at 42 overall. I think they have an opportunity to, I think they have an opportunity to be a lot better than last year. They really, really found themselves in a ditch last year. The transfer quarterback from South Carolina was absolutely a bomb. I think Brewer has an opportunity to be, better. I would hesitate to see him in the Tyler Huntley range of being quite good at QB for the Utes, but anything should be an improvement over where they finished last season. They have some room for improvement across the metric spectrum, though. They need to get better at finishing drives than we've seen so far. Their explosive drives are all right, number 50 overall. I mean, this is kind of shading towards kind of a middling Power 5 offense. They don't take a lot of 3-and-outs or turnovers comparatively, so that's not so bad. A little better throwing the ball than they are running the ball, but I expect that to change a little bit. Utah's offensive line can struggle a little bit in pass protection. That should be something to keep an eye on here. BYU's defense last week, they had an okay game. They definitely got the job done against an Arizona team that's still kind of figuring it out with a new head coach and new scheme and new play, a new QB. But you also, as you were watching it, like Gunnar Cruz, Arizona's QB, left a lot of money on the table. I'm interested to see if Brewer's got more experience than Cruz, and if those guys are open, he's more likely to hit them. I mean, Brewer doesn't have the best arm downfield, but like college, that's not necessarily the biggest thing in the world. So, this defense for BYU, it's Elisa Tuiaki is your defensive coordinator. They have some room to improve. I mean, they definitely did give up some big plays to Arizona. Their play efficiency wasn't great. Gunnar Cruz's stat line, it didn't look too bad. His play looked worse than the stat line, but it didn't look too bad. BYU definitely found ways to let Arizona stay in the game. They were a little better against the run than they were against the pass. But Arizona was definitely playing from behind and leaning into throwing the football. What I'm interested to see in this game, though, is BYU has a pretty active defensive front. I'm interested to see if they are able to put pressure on Brewer and if they are able to contain the Utah run game, because Utah will lean into. There are definitely some parts of of Ludwig's game that look a little bit like a flex bone. So he'll find ways to get tight end arounds involved. Keep an eye on the Utah tight ends in particular, catching the football. Utah still struggles to find ways to get their outside receivers involved in the scheme. Flip it around. You've got Utah's defense. We have them, this is still mostly projection at number 5 overall. But they're returning a lot. They were pretty good last year. They have some room to improve across the sort of metrics board right now, in limited data. Definitely their drive efficiency and explosive drives. These are raw. So the adjusted numbers you'll see that have the preseason weight in them are the top number, the defensive beta rank, and then your effective rush and effective pass. The middle 4 are raw and pretty volatile at this point. But I think particularly with BYU, I wanted to use this season's numbers because I think that they are so much of a different team. But Utah's defense, I think, something to keep an eye on in this game. They are generally an aggressive defense. They're a green dog team. So if BYU doesn't send their back out on a route, Utah's going to send the linebacker who has that back and coverage assignment on a late blitz. Keep an eye on that, because Hall is an interesting QB for BYU, I think, in a lot of ways, and maybe gives them a little bit of a shot in this game that they have at home. BYU's offense was decent last week against what I think is a really improved Arizona defense. BYU was able to set the edge a lot in running plays. And Hall was able to hit some big passing plays as well as making some plays with his legs. He is really athletic. And that could cause Utah some problems, I think, in contain, because even if they are a green dog team, they're going to need to they might need to put someone in particularly athletic and able to keep an eye on Hall just on his own, because I think his wheels might give them a shot here. This is right now is a toss up fully in the model between these two teams. I tend to lean Utah. I think it's a little high at 7 points in Vegas right now, but I tend to be a little bit of a Utah lean here. I think their defense is the unit that you can absolutely rely on coming into this game. Oh boy. So these are also because Michigan was so bad last season. These are this year's numbers because there's no way you could reasonably compare what you saw from Michigan last year to what we think Michigan might be this year. Washington's offense here was and is a major problem. I mean, they really struggled against Montana. I like to think I was one of the first people that said, what the actual heck with the John Donovan hire? But, Jimmy Lake made that hire and here we are. So Washington's offense comes in. This is you tell, the top number, which has the preseason weight in it, is at 26. You start going down the numbers though, which are the raw numbers, and they're pretty horrible. They had an absolutely awful game against Montana. Somewhat more effective throwing the ball. They really did try to air it out. Dylan Morris also had 3 INTs in that game. They struggled to run. They struggled to run the football against Montana, and that's not a good sign. And Newton, their running back, is a banger. So it's not as if he's a guy that, you look at and think, oh, that guy can't break a tackle. Like, he could probably break a tackle. Montana absolutely wrapped him up. Michigan's defense is improving a little bit. I'm interested to see by how much. They absolutely collapsed last season, which I don't think is as much on Don Brown as some personnel things as well. The kind of collapse that Michigan had on both sides of the ball. It didn't come for Josh Gaddis. He kept his job, but it did come for Don Brown. Mike McDonald's your new defensive coordinator here. They have a little bit of room for improvement. They gave up some yards to Western Michigan, even if they didn't give up some points. Some of that was in garbage time. I wouldn't sweat it too much. This will be a little bit more of a test for them. Washington's offense, even if they are not as horrible as last week, I don't expect them to be great. They should be better than Western Michigan, and certainly personnel-wise. But Michigan should have pretty even par, I think, in this game with the Washington offense. I think the defense has a real shot to show how much they've improved here in this game. On the other side of the ball, Michigan's offense under Josh Gaddis really also struggled last season. We have them only at 53. They did put up some points. Western Michigan's, of course, not Clemson or Alabama. But I think that they have, this is the side of the ball I'm really interested in seeing, because Washington's defense is still quite good. They're at number 11 in beta rank right now. Their drive efficiency number, they were really quite good at containing Montana last week. Montana did not put up anything offensively here. Washington still runs the 2 high safety look. Even though, and they have a new defensive play caller, Bob Gregory, because Kwiatkowski's off to Texas. This will be fun to see, because I'm interested to see how Michigan schemes at this. Gaddis, they've never put up a top 10 defense at Michigan. Since Gaddis has been there, they kind of hover in the top 20, top 25 range. They've got to improve. I think for Harbaugh to really keep his job, and the measuring stick is going to be Ohio State, and that's pretty stout measuring stick these days. This offense really has to take a big step forward, and I'm excited to see if they do. We're waiting. Like, Michigan is one of those teams that the data is just weighting them too much down right now, in all likelihood, because of their complete and utter collapse last season. However, we still have them we have this game as close. and if you can, they're going to have to try to put up a big play or two against this Washington team, which is really hard. I mean, like that too high safety look is designed to contain big plays, in which case then Michigan, you have to drive the length of the field in order to put up points, which is a pretty good plan, I think, if you're this Washington squad. I do think the Washington offense improves. I think that they are able to get into let's call it, I don't think this is going to be an offensive explosion of a game. I think Washington maybe gets into the 20-point range, and Michigan ends up somewhere in the 24. We have it at Michigan 58% win probability and 2.62. This is a really important game for Harbaugh. Washington looked so bad last week against Montana that losing to Washington, even as they improve, and they still have a really good talent level on this team, I think losing at home would be pretty brutal for Jim Harbaugh. So this has suddenly become, through Washington, like, instead of being a fun marquee game, it almost feels a little bit like a must win for Harbaugh. Because Washington face planted so hard last week. The replay of the Cheez-It Bowl. So, this is a fun one. I'm excited. So these are last year stats. I believe is what we have it at. Yeah. So this is interesting because TCU, this is Doug Meacham's your new offensive coordinator. We've been trying to let people know that we think TCU will be improved this season offensively, with Meacham now playing calls calling plays. And that was an interesting one, instead of Sonny Cumbie. Offensively last year, TCU graded out with significant improvement. They were, a top 25, fringy top 25 offense. They need to improve their drive efficiency, finishing drives, but they were able, finishing long drives, but they were able to put together some explosive drives, and their play efficiency, their yards per play, controlling for opponent field position was pretty good. Negative drives, too many 3-and-outs, too many turnovers, something to certainly clean up coming into this year. But they were a lot better throwing or running the ball than they were throwing the ball. Duggan gives you a really good option with his legs, and then the key for him and his progression and the progression of this offense is being able to hit the passing plays that become available because of the very good run game. That was not a good matchup for Cal. Cal offensively last week, the bread and butter of this Cal defense under Wilcox for the last couple seasons has been the secondary. And they've lost some coaches out of the secondary, coaches that have moved on to coach elsewhere, including the NFL. But, Peter Sermon's your new defensive coordinator. I don't love that hire for Cal. Sermon struggled everywhere he's been. But last year they were a fringy top 25 defense. They definitely gave up some big plays. They struggled in their play efficiency, but they did prevent long drives, and they did force 3-and-outs and turnovers. The tough thing for this Cal team, they gave up a ton of passing yards to a Nevada team that's going to throw the ball. It has a good quarterback, has a good scheme. They got Hal Mummy's kid as their play caller. They're geared up to throw the ball for sure. But Cal's excelled at shutting down the pass. But they struggled. They have really struggled in stopping interior run. This is going to be a test for them. Where they have particularly struggled is A and B gap. They haven't had a nose tackle that can really play 2 gap for a couple of years now, and it's shown. And it's odd to continue to see them fail to recruit well here, knowing it's really a need for this team. And the defense really, it feels like it's coming a little bit apart. I think this game could be a really bad game matchup for this defense. I think TCU is going to be able to run the ball really effectively in this game. On the other side of the ball, man, Cal's offense looked bad last week against Nevada. Nevada did not have a great defense last year. It hasn't had a great defense in years. They did have a pretty good defense one year with Castile calling plays, and then he got fired after a bad year the year after. So Cal's offense, last year was at 64. They were decent at drive efficiency, but struggled to put up big plays, struggled with play efficiency, too many 3-and-outs, too many turnovers. They're a decent running team. I like their backs, Brown in particular. But Garber's, he's fine. He's just limited in what he's going to be able to give you, but he's a gamer, right? And but he's there. This Cal offense is going to have a tough outing because Gary Patterson's defense looks really good again this season. Last season they were at number 10 overall. And some numbers that for them to keep an eye on. They were pretty good at containing explosive drives. They were really good at forcing 3-and-outs and turnovers, that 12 and negative drives. No big run pass split here. They run that 3-3-5. Patterson's is a little different than say Rocky Long's version of it, but they are able to control the run game pretty well with their setup there. I think this is going to be a really long, tough day for this Cal offense, but we've been waiting. I mean, I'm previewing this because we've been waiting to see what this Bill Musgrave led offense is actually going to look like. This is going to be a really stout test. They didn't look good last week against very bad competition. But we got such a small, odd sample of them last year. I've been kind of waiting to see what this offense might turn out to be. Wilcox did make the change there. But with the defense suddenly struggling and the offense not looking like it's turning around, like Wilcox is going to start to feel a little bit of pressure if this ends up as a little bit of a blowout here. We've got this as TCU with a 77% win probability, 8.34 points. And that might be holding up Cal a little bit with some, projection data and not really, they might not even beat this good. So this is an interesting measuring stick game, I think, for Cal in particular. And, it is a chance in theory for the Pac-12 North to rebound from a really bad week, along with along with those other big games that we have for the Pac-12 North with, Michigan and Ohio State. Oh yes, our group of 5 game, the group of 5 game of the week. I'm so excited for this game. This is 2021 data because Western Kentucky has a new offensive coordinator, and that's why we're covering this game, because I think actually that Western Kentucky is going to end up a lot better than number 94 this season. So Army comes in at number 28. I think Army was legitimately good last season. Some of that's carrying over into this season. We have the offense at 37. Their Army always excels at drive efficiency. They are machine-like at being able to put together long drives. Number 34 in explosive drives. 76 there in negative drives. Obviously a huge run pass split. Brent Davis is your offensive coordinator here for Army. Western Kentucky, you've got Maurice Crum as your defensive coordinator. They're number 85 overall, so far this season. 105 in drive efficiency. This is going to be a tough matchup for them. I mean, this Army offense is a lot to handle. I don't know that anybody does a great job in preparing for the triple option in 1 week, but if they can contain the big plays, for Army, like you just got to have one play in a series where you can get them behind schedule, right? Maybe force them into throwing a ball. It's when you allow them to pick up 5 and 6 yards, on a rush, that their whole playbook is wide open to them. And that's a dangerous place to find yourself. But what they are sort of good at so far is negative drives, 37. They're effective rush, effective pass splits on the bad side, of course, but this is a somewhat typical group of 5 defense. It's not horrible, right? We look at it comparatively to like some of the Power 5 numbers that we look at, but this is sort of a middle of the road group of 5 defense so far in the numbers. They're gonna need, I've been to a game at West Point. I got to see when I was living in New York, I went up and saw Air Force play at Army. It was awesome. I mean, if you ever get a chance to go to Michie Stadium on a fall day and see the Hudson and all the pageantry of college football, it's amazing. Do it. Anyway, on the other side of the ball, this is where I'm so excited for this game.
But Western Kentucky still comes in at number 93 overall. Tyson Helton, their head coach, went out and made a move last season and brought in Zach Kitley from Houston Baptist, who brought in his quarterback, Zap, from Houston Baptist, and they lit it up last season. And you can see here, like, that while our overall number at 93, which still has some preseason weight in it, is quite high, the raw numbers are quite different. They're pretty good. And they're going to throw the ball around a lot. And they looked really good doing it. I'm excited to see them do it in this game. I think that they have a chance to keep up a bit with that Army offense here. Army's defense has definitely improved over, what we've seen from them. But when they've been good, they've mostly been good at stopping the run. This is going to be it is a tough test for the service academies to really play good passing defense and recruit well in the secondary. This is going to be a really tough one. I think Western Kentucky has an opportunity to put up some real points here. They were really explosive in week one. Not a lot of negative drives either. Army, and just again, like, the raw data here is somewhat volatile, was really good at containing big plays in week one. And their play efficiency was excellent, less good at negative drives. Their drive efficiency number could use some work. Not a big run pass split for Army in week one, but this is going to be a really significant test for them. Jeff Monk is going to have them, ready, and Nate Woody is their defensive coordinator. They're going to have to be ready. This is a totally different, kind of passing game than I think that they're really used to. We've got an Army at 89% in this game and 17.28. I think that's high. I think that's mostly the preseason weight, still carrying through in here for Western Kentucky. I think they're a team, because the model doesn't see this coaching change that they have on the offensive side of the football. I think that it's going to be a little bit behind on the Hilltoppers for a little bit. Keep an eye on them in this game. If you get a shot to see any of it, or if you get a shot to check in on the box score, I think Western Kentucky is likely to be able to move the ball quite a bit here. I would still have Army as a favorite. I think that they're just going to be they're a tough, efficient out. But I think Western Kentucky is going to hang this pretty close. Anyway, that's this game. I'm excited. This one will be fun. So that's week 2. I'm excited. We are, as we get further into this. Bowron had the worst week I've ever had in the model period last week. The 2020 projection data, or the 2020 data, is just rotten, and I can't wait to get it out of the model. We had it at 17.3% in season data, which is unusually high for week 1. For fitting to week 2. I went back and refit the projection model to reduce error, and that worked to get it down, but I still expect this to be a rough week versus Vegas, which is unusual. Usually the Nerds beat Vegas by a little bit. So I'm excited to get to the point where we are just all in season data and there's less volatility in there. Then it will not matter how weird 2020 is. We'll have a read on everybody, because Bowron doesn't even take in out of season data after week 6. It might be week 5 this year that we don't take in out of season data. But I'm excited for the year to keep plugging on. I'm excited to see who bounces back this week and who that we thought was going to be good is actually going to be good, because some teams are going to miss, right? Last week we weren't one of them, but a lot of people were in Miami being really good. I didn't think Miami had top 10 potential this season. We'll see. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. Stay safe out there. You can find all the stats you just saw and a whole lot more at sharpcollegefootball.com. Check those out today and check them out. I usually have Beta Rank updated by 9 a.m. in the morning, and I should have it by 9 a.m. tomorrow. The new number's up. So again, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there.